I'm Jamie Dimon. I'm the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. I manage $6 trillion in assets, but I'm going to tell you something nobody knows. In 2008, when the world economy was on the brink of collapse, I stood alone in a room, my hand hovering over the phone, hesitating. When that phone rang, the decision I would make would determine the fate of millions. And in that moment, when I was about to lose control, I questioned myself. What if I'm wrong? The story I'm about to tell you is the untold side of the 2008 crisis, the reality behind the leadership maneuver everyone expected from me. Because that night, even the world's most powerful banker was alone, and the decisions I made shaped the financial system you all live with today. If you want to understand what real leadership means, if you want to learn what happens during a crisis, listen to me. Because this story isn't just about banking. It's about how to make the right decisions under pressure. And trust me, you'll have moments like this in your life too. Let me start with this. There's one thing everyone gets wrong about crisis management. In a crisis, your biggest enemy isn't panic itself, it's time. You have no time to think, no one to consult, it's just you. And the decision you make in that moment changes everything. In those dark days of 2008, Bear Stearns had collapsed, Lehman Brothers had gone bankrupt, and it was our turn. But I did something different. While other banks were drowning, we grew. How? Because I saw the crisis coming, and I'll tell you exactly how. Pre-crisis 2007, everyone was getting rich in the mortgage market. Other banks were investing like crazy in subprime loans. My team came to me and said, "Jamie, why are we staying out of this trend?" That's when the real test of leadership began. Was I going to take the easy path, make the same mistakes as everyone else, or trust my instincts? I told my team, this mortgage business doesn't make sense to me. People are borrowing 10 times their income. This isn't sustainable. And that decision saved JP Morgan. But the real test came later. March 2008. Bear Stearns was collapsing. The Federal Reserve called me. "Jamie, will you buy Bear Stearns?" This was one of the biggest financial decisions in history. An $85 billion burden. But also an opportunity. Let me tell you the details of that phone call. Because this conversation determined the fate of modern finance, and the logic in that decision can teach you how to make tough choices in your own life. I told Paulson, "I'll take Bear Stearns, but I have conditions. First, I want a $29 billion guarantee. Second, I'll buy it for $2 per share, not 10. Why was I so harsh? Because the golden rule of risk management is this. If you're taking big risks, you must also get big protection. But there was something nobody knew at the time. Bear Stearns' real condition was much worse than we thought, and when I learned that truth, it might have been too late. This is where I'll share the real secret. I'm afraid of what happens when I'm not here. Not because I think I'm irreplaceable, because I know what this job really requires. And I'm terrified that whoever comes after me won't understand it in time. Let me explain something most people don't know about running JP Morgan. You're not just managing a bank, you're managing systemic risk for the entire global economy. When Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008, it wasn't just a bank failure. It was a system failure. And someone has to make sure that never happens again. That someone, whether I like it or not, is me. Because JP Morgan isn't just the biggest bank in America. We're the bank other banks turn to when they're in trouble. We're the bank the government calls when the system is breaking. We're too big to fail and too important to leave to chance. Stop here, because this detail changes everything about how you should think about retirement and responsibility. Most people retire when they've saved enough money. I can't retire until I've trained someone who can handle a global financial crisis at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Here's what happened in March 2020 that proves my point. The markets were collapsing, credit was freezing, companies were running out of cash. The Fed called an emergency meeting on a Saturday night. Every major bank CEO was on that call. But when push came to shove, when someone needed to step up and provide liquidity to the system, it was us. It was JP Morgan. It was me making that decision. $50 billion in emergency lending, to companies, to other banks, to the government itself. Decision made in 30 minutes on a conference call. No committee meetings, no board approval. Just me, understanding that if I said no, Monday morning would bring financial chaos. You think a 35-year-old hotshot MBA from Harvard could have made that call? You think someone with 10 years of experience would have understood the stakes, the interconnectedness, the domino effect of saying no? This is where most people misunderstand what it takes to run a systemically important bank. It's not about making money. Any decent banker can make money. It's about preventing disasters. And disaster prevention requires experience, judgment, and the credibility to act decisively when there's no time to explain. But here's the part that nearly broke me psychologically. The night I realized I might never be able to retire. It was December 2021. My wife Judy and I were having dinner. She looked at me and said, "Jamie, you promised me you'd step down by 65. Then you said 67. Now you're talking about staying longer. When does it end?" I couldn't answer her because I didn't know. And that's when the weight of this position really hit me. I'm not just postponing my retirement. I'm potentially sacrificing the rest of my personal life for a responsibility I never asked for but can't walk away from. So far, you've only seen the surface of what this job really costs. The real cost isn't the 80-hour weeks or the constant stress. The real cost is the knowledge that your personal desires don't matter anymore. Your family's needs come second. Your health concerns take a back seat. Because when you're responsible for systemic stability, everything else becomes negotiable. Let me tell you about my cancer diagnosis in 2014, throat cancer. Doctors said I needed immediate surgery and months of treatment. My first thought wasn't about my health. It was about market stability. Can we keep this quiet until I figure out succession? That's not normal thinking. That's what happens when you carry this weight. I delayed announcing my diagnosis for 2 weeks, not because of pride or fear, because I needed to prepare contingency plans for every possible scenario. What happens to JP Morgan if I'm incapacitated? What happens to our government relationships? What happens to our crisis management capabilities? The board wanted me to take a leave of absence. I refused. Because in 2014, we were still dealing with post-crisis regulations, new capital requirements, stress tests. The bank needed stability at the top, so I managed chemotherapy appointments around board meetings. I took radiation treatments before congressional hearings. That's when I understood something fundamental about this position. It's not a job you can pause. It's not a responsibility you can delegate during personal crises. It's a 24/7, life-consuming obligation that follows you everywhere. But the truly shocking part had not been revealed yet. The personal sacrifice is just the beginning. The real prison isn't the time commitment, it's the knowledge. Once you know how fragile the system really is, once you understand how close we come to collapse on a regular basis, you can't unknow it. I know things that keep me awake at night. Cyber attack simulations that show how quickly our payment systems could be crippled. Stress test scenarios that reveal which major banks are still vulnerable. Geopolitical risks that could trigger the next financial crisis. This knowledge isn't something you can hand off to your replacement in a transition meeting. Here's what happened in 2022 that convinced me I couldn't leave yet. The war in Ukraine created a commodity crisis. Energy prices spiked, food security became a global issue, and buried in all of that chaos was a banking crisis nobody saw coming. Regional banks started failing, Silicon Valley Bank, Credit Suisse. The system was stressed in ways that reminded me of 2008. And once again, JP Morgan became the solution. We acquired First Republic Bank. We provided stability when others couldn't. We did what systemically important banks are supposed to do. But here's the thing. That crisis management didn't happen automatically. It required someone with the experience to recognize the patterns, the relationships to coordinate with regulators, and the institutional knowledge to act quickly. It required me. And that's when I realized something that changed my entire perspective on retirement. I'm not staying in this job because I love power or money. I'm staying because I haven't yet built a system that can function without me. And until I do, leaving would be irresponsible. This brings me to the decision I made that no one talks about. Third, I'm investing in chaos hedges, gold, silver, Bitcoin, commodities. things that historically hold value when traditional systems break down. I'm not a gold bug or a crypto fanatic. I'm a realist. And the reality is that when people lose faith in governments and currencies, they turn to alternative stores of value. But here's what most people get wrong about gold and Bitcoin. They think these assets will make them rich. They won't. They're insurance policies, not investments. Their job is to preserve purchasing power when everything else collapses, not to create wealth. Wealth creation comes later, during the rebuilding phase. But you have to survive the collapse first. And that requires holding assets that maintain value when paper money becomes worthless. Fourth, I'm building optionality, citizenship in multiple countries, bank accounts in multiple currencies, skills that are valuable regardless of economic conditions, the ability to relocate quickly if necessary. This isn't paranoia. This is prudent planning for an uncertain future. I now hold passports for 4 different countries: United States, New Zealand, Singapore, and Switzerland. Why? Because when economic collapse hits, it often comes with political instability. And political instability can lead to restrictions on capital movement, or worse, confiscation of private wealth. It's happened before. In 1933, Roosevelt banned private gold ownership in America. In 1966, Johnson imposed restrictions on overseas investments. In 1971, Nixon ended dollar convertibility to gold, emergency measures during economic crises, and we're heading into the biggest economic crisis since the Great Depression. Having multiple citizenships gives you options. If one government becomes hostile to wealth, you can move to another. But here's the most important part of my strategy. I'm preparing for the recovery, because there will be one. Empires fall, but civilization continues, and the people who position themselves correctly during the collapse become the wealth builders of the next era. The opportunities coming in the next decade will be unlike anything we've seen since World War II. Entire industries will be restructured, new technologies will emerge, political systems will be redesigned, and those who understand the transition will profit enormously from it. Let me share my timeline for what's coming. And remember, I've been studying economic cycles for 50 years. This isn't speculation. This is pattern recognition. Phase 1, 2024 to early 2025, the slow motion crash. Markets will be volatile but won't collapse yet. The government will keep printing money to support asset prices. Inflation will remain high but manageable. This is the time to position yourself, to move money out of vulnerable assets and into protective ones. Most people will ignore the warning signs because the crisis hasn't hit yet. Don't be most people. This phase is already underway. Regional bank failures, commercial real estate collapse, corporate debt defaults. These are early warning signs that most people dismiss as isolated incidents. They're not isolated. They're connected, and they're accelerating. Phase 2, mid-2025 to 2027, the cascade failure. Something will trigger the collapse. Maybe a major bank failure, maybe a sovereign debt crisis, maybe a geopolitical shock. It doesn't matter what the trigger is. What matters is that the system is so fragile that any shock can bring it down. Stock markets will fall 60 to 80%. Real estate will crash in most areas. The dollar will lose significant value against other currencies. Unemployment will spike to 15 to 20%. Social unrest will increase dramatically. This is when having cash and international diversification becomes critical. Because during this phase, capital controls will be implemented. The government will restrict your ability to move money overseas. They'll do it in the name of financial stability. But it's really about keeping wealth trapped in the collapsing system. Phase 3, 2027 to 2030, the restructuring. This is when the new economic order emerges. New monetary systems, new trade relationships, new political alignments, massive wealth transfer from unprepared to prepared. This is also when the greatest opportunities emerge. Real estate at 20 cents on the dollar, stocks of solid companies trading for nothing, entire industries available for acquisition, but only if you survived phases 1 and 2 with capital intact. Most people focus on avoiding the crash. Smart people focus on profiting from the recovery. Here's what most people don't understand about economic collapses. They're not random. They're cyclical. They happen every 75 to 80 years like clockwork. 1789, French Revolution and economic collapse. 1860s, American Civil War and monetary crisis. 1930s, Great Depression and World War II. 2010s to 2020s, global debt crisis and social upheaval. The pattern is always the same: massive debt accumulation, currency debasement, social division, political paralysis, economic collapse, then restructuring and renewal. We're currently in the collapse phase. The restructuring is coming, and those who understand the pattern will position themselves to benefit from both the destruction and the renewal. But here's what's different this time: the scale. Previous collapses were regional. This one is global. Previous collapses had escape valves. This one doesn't. When America crashes, there's no other economy large enough to absorb the displaced capital. When the dollar fails, there's no obvious replacement currency ready to take over. This means the collapse will be deeper and longer than anything in modern history. But it also means the recovery will create wealth opportunities unlike anything we've ever seen. Imagine buying Manhattan real estate after the 1929 crash. Imagine investing in American companies after World War II. Imagine acquiring assets during the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, multiply those opportunities by 10. That's what's coming for those who position themselves correctly. But you have to survive the collapse first, and survival requires preparation. Not hope, not wishful thinking. Not trusting that someone else will fix the problems. Actual preparation. Here's my personal survival checklist. I'm sharing this not as advice, but as transparency about how I'm positioning for what's coming. Financial preparation: 6 months of expenses in cash, precious metals equal to 10% of net worth. Real estate outside major U.S. cities, international investments in multiple currencies, skills that remain valuable during economic turmoil, geographic preparation, valid passport with multiple country options, residence established in at least 2 countries, local connections and resources outside the United States, understanding of different tax and legal systems, physical preparation, food storage for 6 months minimum, water purification and storage capabilities, basic medical supplies and medications, energy independence options including solar panels and generators, self-defense capabilities and training. This might sound extreme to some people, but extreme times require extreme preparation. And these are extreme times. The debt levels are extreme. The asset bubbles are extreme. The social divisions are extreme. The political dysfunction is extreme. Extreme problems require extreme solutions, and the most extreme solution is being prepared when everyone else isn't. Here's my final message to you. I'm not trying to scare you. Fear is paralyzing. I'm trying to wake you up, because awareness creates options, and options create freedom. The next 5 years will separate the prepared from the unprepared, the adaptable from the rigid, the realistic from the optimistic. You get to choose which category you're in, but you have to choose now. Because once the collapse begins, your choices become much more limited and much more expensive. The people who survive and thrive through the coming economic transformation won't be the smartest or the luckiest. They'll be the ones who saw it coming and acted accordingly. The ones who prepared when preparation was still possible. The ones who positioned themselves for both survival and opportunity. I've liquidated $47 billion in assets because I see what's coming. The question is, do you see it too? And more importantly, are you going to do something about it? The choice is yours. But choose quickly. Because time is running out faster than most people realize. And when the collapse comes, and it will come, there will be 2 types of people: those who prepared and those who wished they had. Don't be in the second group.